Well, hi, everyone. Welcome back to Pushing the Limits this week. I have Dr. Elizabeth Yurth, my favorite doc in the world. Welcome back again. Thanks for coming on again, Dr. Elizabeth. You're just amazing. And before we dive in, I want to tell people I've been on this massive journey with my mum, who's had a brain tumor, which has turned out to be lymphoma. We've had the brain tumor removed, everyone. And thank you very much to everybody on her team who has been working it, from the amazing neurosurgeon, Mr. Andrew Parker, right through to Dr. Elizabeth. So we are going to do a bit of a combo episode today. We're going to talk a little bit about cancers, and we're also going to talk a little bit about immune system, and actually the two overlap quite considerably, don't they? So welcome to the show again. So wonderful to have you back.
Lisa. I always love you, and I always love talking.
We do. I just love to
Our
hang
hard
out
thing
with
is
you.
just to be it's just we usually end up talking for an hour beforehand.
Yeah.
I know you've been, kudos to you that you're actually doing this. I know it's been a long, Lisa and I, for those who don't I've known Lisa's mom for a little while too. She, kind of started with just kind of doing the anti-aging stuff, and then unfortunately we got derailed by this diagnosis. So that sort of started us down a little different path. But she's a super tough, very cool lady. And as you guys, if any of you who follow Lisa and follow her Instagram posts, know how mean she is to her. And
very mean. She moans a lot, especially when she was on the steroids. Oh my god. Funny anecdote. They had her on dexamethasone, which is a steroid, as you know, in quite high doses, and her personality changed 100%. It was hilarious because
she got real irritable and just kind of
bossy, opinionated, and I'm like, welcome to my world, Mum. I've got that too every single day of my life. So it was quite hilarious because she's a very peaceful, very serene
right, exactly person. She's just
So thank God she's off that now, and she's doing everything she has to. And we've been throwing the bus at it, haven't we, Doctor? We've been
we'll fight this thing. Just another. As I said when Lisa said, "Well, you basically brought her back from death one time," I said, she's like 9 lives. This is just the second one, so you still got 7 more to go. It's fine.
I love it, and I love that attitude. And it's just book number. What are we up to?
Exactly.
Book number 4.
Yeah, exactly. It's now become a series.
It's a series. How not to die. It's
a little like Harry Potter.
It feels like that at times. So let's do a bit of diving in. So in this journey that I've been on, and then finding out Mum had lymphoma, which is it's a B-cell lymphoma in this case, a high grade, meaning it's aggressive. And so I've been diving into cancer research for obvious reasons. And I've come across, you've been helping me do finding out about Jane McClelland, who we're going to have on the show as well soon. Amazing lady who survived 3 terminal cancers, written a book called How to Starve Cancer, which isn't just about diet, but off-label drugs. And that's been very powerful. And then I've also been studying Dr. Dom D'Agostino's work around ketosis and ketones and inhibiting tumor growth and so on. So you use both of these approaches in the stuff that you do. What is your take? What's really shocked me in the cancer journey is that everything that was healthy for us prior to cancer is actually not healthy when you've got it. Can you explain that to people? Because that's
that's exactly right. It's very, very hard, because honestly, you kind of have to stop everything that's good in terms of regrowth and making our mitochondria all healthy and all that kind of stuff. You got to put all that dead end to that, because we really want just to get rid of everything for a while. So it's the biggest problem, right? Is that we have to, you're not going to build muscle while you have cancer. You're not going to, that's because everything that's sort of anabolic and growth and all that kind of stuff, we got to sort of slow all that down.
Yeah.
Now, as a lot of you guys know, we do a little bit of that in our anti-aging realm, right? We do some of that where we want to go through these autophagy phases, where we want to get rid of all the bad cells. And then we want to regrow, and we want to get rid of bad cells and regrow. So we always want this getting rid of damaged cells. What happens in cancer, though, is we have this accumulation of damage. And so now we have to go really aggressively at getting rid of everything that's allowing cell growth. So that's what I tell people. It's like, it's everything, and again, we balance that a little bit with our aging stuff, is that we always want to kind of take people into more of a catabolic pathway or a breakdown, get rid of stuff. But we also want our muscles and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
And you can't really do both. And it is the struggle sometimes with people, is to say, okay, yeah, you've got to go exercise, you've got to go do this stuff, even though you don't feel like it, because that's going to help maintain glucose and everything. But in general, we're going to block muscle growth. We're going to block everything that's kind of
everything that's beneficial prior to a cancer diagnosis.
Right. And cancer gets a little bit misinterpreted in that it's actually a mitochondrial disease. So it happens at the mitochondrial level. They took cancer cells and they took the mitochondria out of a cancer cell. And when they took the mitochondria out of the cancer cell and they injected the cancer cell with a healthy mitochondria, it was no longer a cancer cell. But when they took that cancer mitochondria out and put it into a normal cell, that cell became a cancer cell. So we know it actually begins at the mitochondrial level. Exactly. And because the cancer cell needs tons and tons of energy, right? It needs glucose and it needs oxidative phosphorylation. It needs to make tons of ATP because it's growing at massive rates. It's reproducing and replicating and doing all this stuff. And so, we got to shut all that down. And so you've got to work at that mitochondrial level, right? At the pathways that are making ATP at the mitochondrial level, and starting to block all of those pathways that are allowing the cells to thrive and be healthy, right?
Yeah.
So we got to block all of that growth, and we have to hit it from a lot of different pathways.
Yeah.
The tricky thing about cancer is that you block one pathway, it finds another. It's going to get energy. The cancer cells are craving energy. Glucose is their biggest one, right? That's their biggest source. Which is why when you talk about Dom D'Agostino, you've got to get people, ketotic. You have to, because you've got to get rid of glucose, right?
Yep.
But it is a mitochondrial disease. So when we look at diseases in general, I'm kind of passionate about how much mitochondria play a role, but this is definitely a mitochondrial disease. And when we talk about some of the ways to target it, that's why a lot of the approaches you're taking are working on the mitochondria.
Yeah. So, like prior to this diagnosis and prior to mum having problems, we were doing, phases of growth stuff.
Right.
And then we were doing, times a week when we were on metformin and other things to lower the glucose and lower the growth. One of the questions that popped up in my head is, after studying all Jane McClellan's work and looking at all the pathways, the glutamine pathways, the glucose pathways, and the fatty acids or the fatty pathways, that feed tumor growth, is the one around nucleoside salvage and macropinocytosis, the autophagy pathways, basically, aren't they?
Right.
Spermidine is something we've talked about in the past episodes and how wonderful spermidine is. One of the questions that I had in my head was, is spermidine bad in the case of cancer because of autophagy? I'm a bit confused on whether I'm wanting to upregulate autophagy or downregulate autophagy in those two pathways. Can you, that's a tricky question. Yeah,
it's a very tricky question, and it actually, interestingly enough, appears to be a little different for different cancers. Like, we know actually spermidine appears to be very, very beneficial in colon cancer. It actually has been shown to be super, super beneficial. And there's been some other cancers like prostate where they actually found that blocking the polyamine pathways, that may actually be good in terms of getting rid of the cancer cells. So I don't know that we're super clear on the answer to that question. In general, I think that there's probably even a dose dependence to that too, right? Because we know that probably very, very high dose spermidine is going to have a very dramatic autophagy effect. And again, where spermidine works is at the mitochondrial level, which is nice, because so it's mitophagy, and we want to kill off those. But the question is, at what dose is that, right? And if I don't get enough of that dose, am I potentially, not, I'm just propagating some cells and getting rid of some. So I don't know. And it's the hard thing with a lot of the stuff we do is the research may be still a little bit too early for us to say definitively. So I get that question a lot about spermidine. My general answer is, I think that at high dose, it's probably very good, but I don't go there yet because I just don't know the answer. So I would say that probably I wouldn't use it in this case until, again, until I have more
Until-
research, until I know that, and we just don't know. And we're hitting, we need to hit those. We need to get rid of those damaged mitochondria. So, using things like doxycycline, right? So doxycycline may be a really nice way to be doing that, because we know if you think about mitochondria as bacteria, which is what they are. Remember, they were their own little bacteria back they invaded us.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. They started out as their own little bacteria. That's why they're so cool. They have their own RNAs, their own DNAs, mitochondrial DNA. They're completely independent of us. And so they basically allowed us to become aerobic organisms. They started making energy supply.
Yep.
But so if you think about them as bacteria, you can see why doxycycline, which is an antibacterial agent, works very well to get rid of these mitochondria. And so there's damaged mitochondria, right? So they're taking up, this doxycycline, and we're killing off some of these mitochondria. And if we think about this cancer again as this mitochondrial disease, that's probably the approach I think is a really, a good approach to think about in these cancers, is to attack the mitochondria, blocking oxidative phosphorylation. But that's why I think doxycycline has some really, really interesting benefits. We know it works on the mitochondrial level. And in fact, it actually really helps. It helps damaged mitochondria to just go on a merry way, get rid of them. Yeah.
Apoptosis.
So I think that will maybe, I probably would stick to those approaches that right now we have better answers to.
Yeah. And because spermidine is so good for
it's so good, right? And it may be
cancer.
that actually like 8 a day, like at a high dose, it makes sense to me, because it does have a very, very, very good mitophagy properties at that kind of dose. It does kill off mitochondria. But I just don't know the answer to what is the right dose for what person. We need more research.
And for this particular type of cancer and so on, because it is with autophagy, when you're actually killing off broken and damaged cells, that's where it becomes this like nucleoside salvage pathway, isn't it? From what I'm sort of trying to put the biochemistry together, but this is where you're actually recycling, so the cancer cells can use the recycled proteins, broken proteins, and that becomes another fuel source for it. So you've got to block
that's why you have
to.
So then you have to use something to block that pathway, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And then you have to use like dipyridamol. Dipyridamol is going to block the nucleoside salvage pathways, and that's why when people talk about cancer, and even our chemotherapeutic drugs, which are working, they tend to be working on one pathway. That's why cancer is so hard, because you trick it away from one pathway, it finds another pathway. So, and so exactly what you're talking about. It's like, oh, great, then I'm just going to use this. So it goes into this nucleoside salvage pathways, and so you got to block that.
Yeah.
So and you have to work at it from a whole bunch of different realms.
And this is where, this is like it's just the same with the journey that I was on with Mum with her rehabilitation of her brain. It wasn't a one thing fixed it. It was attacking it on many things. And so, especially with Jane McClellan's work, she had this lovely graph where she had, the cancer in the middle, if you like. She called it her spot of bother, and I like that attitude. And then she's got arrows coming in, like you're firing at this thing from 100 different pathways. And in that mix is, blocking down the glucose. So she's been on a very strict diet for starters, because I really didn't know what the hell to feed her. So I basically only fed her vegetables. That's all she got. No protein, basically, and no fat, because I just didn't want to feed the damn thing until I've worked out what it is. And we're still waiting on a final detailed diagnosis. And now I've introduced a little bit more protein, because we are dealing with a lack of protein in here. But trying not to feed the thing, but not starve the person. Yeah. And this is where these off-label drug combos come in, eh?
Right. And that's what's kind of cool about like Jay McClellan's work, is these are all drugs that, or supplements that are well-known, approved,
safe,
good safety, inexpensive, readily available, that you can utilize. That, some you need a doctor's prescription for, others are supplements that you can just use. But they're drugs that, any doctor is going to be like, oh, I know what metformin is. I know what doxycycline is. And I'll caveat that with, I always recommend doing these hand in hand with conventional approaches to cancer. I don't think you do this instead of the conventional approaches. I know there's people who are like, oh, I'm going to treat this all naturally. I think you have to be careful with chemotherapeutic drugs too, but that there's using these things together and constant synergy between them, right? And that working, and that's where it is funny, and I don't know how much you'll run into this with your oncologist, they will just say, don't do anything
Yeah,
else
that's what I'm
except what we're
worrying
recommending,
about.
right? Yeah, we don't want you to be, and I get that all the time. I mean,
Yeah,
where the docs are like, no, don't do any of that. You
because
know,
they don't know
that's a
about
bad
it.
idea because they don't know, right? And so, you know, even though you can say, well, you know, to ask them why. I mean, ask them why. You know, I have actually a leukemia patient, young leukemia patient. She lives in Israel. You know, and she's young, she's 32, and she has really aggressive myelogenous leukemia. And, you know, so we put her on, you know, like Jane's protocol, and, you know, and we're doing thymosin alpha-1. And literally her doctor said, you know, if we're going to do this therapy, you need to be off of all this stuff. You know, so
and
then
this is the bloody problem, isn't it?
Right.
So in you know, I was listening to Dom D'Agostino talking on a podcast, and he was talking like, you know, we now have you know, medical oncologists, we have radiation oncologists, we have what was the other one that he said, and we also need a metabolic oncologist, and this is the piece that's missing out of the standard model. So we need the standard model, but when they go and say, don't do intravenous vitamin C, don't do hyperbaric oxygen therapy, don't do ketosis, don't do any, when they don't know about that, again, and I've experienced this a number of times, unfortunately, in my life, where, again, you know, with mum's brain rehabilitation, it was like, no, none of that's going to work. Well, they were wrong. They were dead wrong. And so I have that natural skepticism, or no, put it this way, want that input, want your input, want other people's input, and then I make my decisions.
And you want data.
Apologies,
too,
everyone.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. So you know, if somebody just tells me, okay, do this, I want to see the evidence too.
Yeah.
But there's ample evidence to support these things. You could look up, you know, metformin's mechanisms or doxycycline's mechanisms, you know, and, you know, or the statin drugs and their mechanisms, and why do they work? So, you know, so you need scientific evidence, right? And so then I will arm my patients with, okay, well, show them the scientific data. And then I said, you know, and if they can prove me wrong, I'm fine. So if the oncologist then comes and goes, okay, yeah, but look at this study. This shows that what you're going to do with what I'm doing is going to be detrimental.
Yeah.
And I'll critically look at that study, and I may change my mind, but I want them to prove it to me. And that's where I get really frustrated, right? Is why are doctors so incredibly closed-minded to read the scientific evidence and then either support or negate it. You know, I mean, we're living in a world where people can just say what they want to say. I mean, that's happened with a lot of things, as you know, right? And without scientific evidence to support it. And there's nothing I do that I've not researched up the yin yang about.
Extensively.
You know?
Yeah. And this is where we need their expertise, because I don't know the drug interactions between some of the things that I'm doing and the specific chemo that I may be you know, told to take, or for mum. And so I'm, you know, I'm stuck in that position going, well, do I not do anything and I just follow the standard route? And, you know, but we need that expertise.
In general, no, right? But yeah, it'd be nice if you had the
drug interaction,
the oncologists who are looking at this stuff and understand it and looking at metabolic cellular level things, but they just know their study protocols, and that's what they're going to do.
That's all they're going to do. And this has come from like 1924, I think it was, Otto Warburg, who was a Nobel Prize laureate, who discovered the Warburg effect. And this really, you know, set the stage for us understanding the metabolism of how cancer, and this is how PET scans work and why they can use it for diagnosis, is because cancer sucks glucose like no tomorrow. It takes, I don't know, 20 times as amount of glucose that other cells do, and that's how they can pinpoint it in the body. But somewhere along the 40s, 50s, and 60s, it got derailed into it's a genetic disease, and that's it. Disease, and this has set us down decades of, and there's a, you know, it's the chicken and egg. It's like that mitochondria example that you gave before, where it starts off in the mitochondria.
Mitochondria. That's why we know it's not a genetic. It's not just a genetic disease. Our genetics, just like everything, can predispose us to things, but it's not a genetic disease. Because otherwise the mitochondria, which are independent of that and have their own DNA, would not be the thing that can churn the cancer cell, right? Because I'm not taking, the mitochondria's got different DNA. It's, you know, so to blame it all on genetics are like in everything. I mean, you study epigenetics. I mean, you
Yeah.
know that, but everything has a secondary issue, and and you're right. That got
even
very derailed and very
Yeah.
neglected to look at metabolism.
And now it's coming about around again, but unfortunately, in clinical
Right.
practice, it seems to still be 20, 30 years behind, as in all areas of medicine that I've looked into.
Yeah.
And then you get the thing, like they get a tumor biopsy, like they took mother's tumor out. They did, the heterogeneity, meaning that one part of the tumor will give genetic mutations in this direction, and then the other part of the tumor might give genetic mutations and completely different. In other words, there's no zygous or what do you call it? That where it's one
homogeneous, like a homogeneous pattern. Yeah.
And this means that it's actually started in the mitochondria, in the metabolism, and then caused genetic changes, not the other way around.
Right. Exactly.
What it appears to be.
And again, those studies are there that, you take the mitochondria, if we could transplant all the mitochondria back out of the cancer cell, you could change it back into a normal cell.
Yeah.
So, so why are the doctors not looking at that evidence? Is why, why aren't we looking at this? This is a mitochondrial disorder. We need to treat the mitochondria, which is going to be metabolism, because that's where the mitochondria is, right? That's what the mitochondria are doing, right?
Decades up the wrong tree, and nobody wants to.
Right. Nobody wants to change.
Of dollars.
Right. Yeah.
And there is an aspect of it, there is certain things, and and so it's not to say that it's been a waste of time what they've studied and stuff, but
I mean, we've made headways in cancer, right? We have,
yeah.
So we're not going to deny that there has been progress in that realm, but if we put everything together, we'd be a whole lot further down that path, and even the realm of one of the questions is, do you ever, we all probably always have cancer. It's just that we're getting rid of the cells, and, and so
the immune system,
the immune system, responds appropriately to keep those cancer cells in check. So it's when the immune system gets right. That's why cancer is a disease of aging more so, right? Because your immune system starts becoming dysfunctional as we age. So we can no longer get rid of the immune system surveillance is gone. So a lot has to go wrong to get cancer, and you see cancer in young people, but mostly it's a disease like all of our other diseases, an age-related disease, because the immune system becomes much more detrimental. And when you look, and that's why, when our immune systems get taxed by something like a virus, right? That's why so many viruses are like Epstein-Barr virus. Well, Epstein-Barr virus is very linked. So Epstein-Barr, right? Yes, right. She was EBV positive on that.
Yeah.
So we know EBV is very, very linked to lymphoma. So we know that something about that virus triggers our immune system. You have a significantly, and many, many people get Epstein-Barr, right? That's mono. Everybody gets mono, right? But it can stick around latently. And so we know there's a lot of viruses, cytomegalovirus, Epstein-Barr virus, COVID's probably going to end up doing this too, but a lot of viruses that have dysregulated the immune system. And now 30 years later, you actually end up with a cancer that's related to that. But yeah, that's right. Her lymphoma cells, were EBV, positive.
Yeah, we're EBV positive.
So, and it's worrisome, because if you look at these, how many people have EBV, and we sort of say, mono, everybody gets mono. Yeah. But should we be more aggressively using antiviral agents? One of my friends who does a lot of, cellular medicine puts almost all of her patients initially on some antiviral agents, assuming that most of us have latent viruses that are taxing our immune systems.
Well,
so
is
my
there one for
always
EBV?
trying to keep Epstein-Barr in check, right?
Yeah. Is there one actually for Epstein-Barr virus? Like in the case of mum, is there an antiviral?
So there are some antivirals that are probably beneficial in Epstein-Barr. Even ivermectin, as it is for COVID, may be helpful for Epstein-Barr. So there are some, and there are some, other antiviral agents that you can utilize that have some crossover to Epstein-Barr, even some of the HIV drugs, interestingly enough, that we're using actually in some of our COVID long haulers too, to help get rid of, these kind of chronic viral infections.
Wow.
And why does that happen? Well, if my immune system is always having to keep this virus in check, it just can't function normally. So now I'm starting to deplete my lymphocytic, population, my lymphocytes, so my innate immune system becomes taxed. One of the things we always follow in our patients is the ratio of neutrophils to lymphocytes.
Yes.
Because when that ratio, and you and I've talked about this, when that ratio starts to change, so the goal is always to have a relatively equal number of neutrophils and lymphocytes, because that's neutrophils, think of them as your chronic inflammatory, and lymphocytes are your innate immune system.
Yeah.
When my innate innate immune system starts to become taxed and not functioning well, then you'll start to see the lymphocyte count drop and drop and drop and drop. And that means now I don't have the immune surveillance to get rid of these cells that are, basically like little invaders.
Okay.
And,
So that's,
and
that's
viruses
just
like Epstein-Barr do that dramatically. My son he actually got Epstein-Barr and COVID at the same time. And his white count literally went down to a normal white count would be somewhere like 4 to 7, his white count went down to 0.8. I mean, his T lymphocyte count went down to 0.8. That's what HIV does, right? It depletes your lymphocyte count. So now think about what's happening. If my immune system is fighting off cancer cells, getting, basically, the macrophages see the cancer cells as invaders, they get rid of them. But if I don't have that, so now I've got chronic EBV, the cancer cells can take over. So I think it's underappreciated how much these viruses are playing a role in our long haul.
Of cancer and HIV.
But we've linked them to even dementias, right? So herpes simplex virus. We've seen very high levels of HSV viral titers in people. So how many people have had, cold sores, right?
Got one right now.
HSV1. Well, that latent virus is also attacks the immune system. We know there's a link between the, herpes simplex virus, particularly type 6, that's linked very much to Alzheimer's dementia because the same thing, So
these antiviral,
so some of these antivirals, right, maybe actually something that we should be, getting a little bit more aggressive at looking at. Should we be looking in our patients, in these aging labs we're doing, should we be running these, viral titers on them and seeing, what sort of latent viruses are sitting there, potentially, setting themselves up for harm, right?
I want to do that because I've had shingles and I've got the herpes virus. I've had glandular fever, so Epstein-Barr virus. Is it all sitting there, waiting to kick off?
And that's where, so simple lab, that your listeners can look at their simple CBC, their complete blood count. And if that lymphocyte count's dropping, like now you've got, 70% neutrophils and 20% lymphocytes, your immune system is not doing well.
Wow.
And there's something that's taxing your immune system. It's a super simple parameter to follow that tells you that, and doctors don't even look at that, but it's really important that lymphocyte count stays up, because that means your innate immune system, which is the one that's going to fight off everything, is still healthy. And most people, it doesn't stay healthy. Most people, as we age, the innate immune system gets.
So we need to. So, and on that point, that brings us to peptides a little bit, because we're using, under your guidance, a couple of different peptides with Mum, which we're still waiting for. But anyway, the thymosin alpha 1. Is a peptide, a naturally occurring peptide. So peptides, just for people who don't know, can you give us a brief what the heck a peptide is? Because no doctors that I've spoken to in New Zealand know what the hell a peptide is, let alone how to get it.
Peptides are basically small proteins in a sense. So a protein it's a chain of amino acids, and they can be 2 amino acids put together, but they're somewhere between 2 and 50 amino acids. So all they are is amino acid chains that make, instead of a protein, which is a big amino acid change, that they are smaller chains. So less than 50 is a peptide, more than 50 is a protein. Yep. And there's peptide hormones, and there's neuropeptides. They have all sorts of different things that they do in our body. So our body makes thousands of peptides. And then there's synthetic peptides that have been developed to do certain things as well. So not all of our peptides that we utilize are natural to our body, but a fair number are. And thymosin alpha 1 is one that is natural to our body. So when we're young, when we're born, we have giant thymus glands. So our thymus gland is a big old huge gland in our chest, and it's huge when we're babies. It's huge. It takes up half our chest.
Wow.
And then it gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. It's at its best at puberty. And after puberty, the thymus gland starts to shrink. So your immune system is really at its best around puberty. And after that, it actually, and the key is that the thymus gland makes these peptides, one called, these what we call thymic peptides, and one is thymosin or thymosin alpha 1. And thymosin alpha 1 sort of tells your T lymphocytes, in a sense, what to do. So your bone marrow makes these T lymphocytes, and it's going to educate them. I always sort of think of it like camp for your lymphocytes. So it's going to educate them on what to do. Right. Fight this virus. Don't attack herself. Don't. So they're the link between, autoimmune disease and, and fighting viruses. So as the thymus gland shrinks, and by the time you're, your mom's age, it's peanut size. Even at my age, it's tiny, tiny. And so you don't have the thymic peptide. So now my innate immune system is a little more on its own. You hope that some of it's been trained, but it's not as functional. And so basically, if you could give back what we had at puberty,
Yeah.
which, and again, the thymus does other things too. It makes thymosin beta-4, which is a repair peptide. But for this, we want lots of thymosin alpha-1. So for our patients who have autoimmune diseases or cancers, we want to help the immune system as much as possible. We give them back what they're lacking, which is this thymosin alpha-1. Very, very safe. You could give massive doses. I mean, you could give, bathe in it. You could give massive doses if you could afford it.
Yeah,
but
it's very expensive. Yeah,
it's actually utilized as a drug in a lot of countries. It's called Zadaxin. In a lot of countries, they actually utilize it whenever patients are going through chemotherapy to help the immune system stay strong.
Wow.
And they also have used it as an adjunct for vaccines, because one of the reasons vaccines don't work very well when we get older is because our innate immune system is gone, right?
No antibodies.
So we'll give Zadaxin when they give a vaccine so that they can get an innate immune response. They can form antibodies. They can form that T cell memory. And so when patients are sick with cancer, we want to help that immune system, especially when they start doing things like chemotherapy, because chemotherapy really knocks down your immune system, right? So, we want to support the immune system, and that way we keep the immune system healthy enough to help fight the cancer, and while the chemotherapy is trying to kill off these cancer cells. And yet it's as you know, it's not easy to get.
No.
Here it is a very extremely safe, right? And yet it's expensive and hard to obtain. And
it's a sub-Q injection, which
it's a sub-Q injection.
And you've got to learn, But I've been studying, and I had Dr. William Seeds on, and I've been studying peptides, and it's a big area to understand, but it's also extremely important to understand this.
Yeah, it is, because these are things, again, you've got to give back the body what it's lacking, and that's one of the places it's really lacking. And again, it's totally safe. There's almost nothing that you could do wrong with thymosin alpha-1. Like I said, you could give massive doses. In our people, some of our patients who get very sick with viruses, for instance, we'll give them huge doses to help them survive the virus, because they need that robust immune response.
And include the coronavirus, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, any kind of virus. But any kind of virus.
Any kind of virus. It's just good.
But it could be really helpful. But again, it's especially here in the U.S., really, really hard to get. And as you know, and where you are as well, super hard to get. But it's a great adjunct for patients who are doing chemotherapy. And the sad thing is, in some countries, they just naturally do it along with chemotherapy. So for like your mom, when she starts going through, and like I said, I'm never an advocate of saying, don't do all the traditional approaches, because I do think there's some value to them. But we want to support the body along with it. And so we definitely want like thymosin alpha-1 on board, and relatively high amounts, depending on how the immune system is getting affected. So you follow things like what is happening to the lymphocytes. We want to keep the lymphocyte count going.
Yeah, see, this is one of the first things that alerted me to anything before even she had the mouth droop and the stuff that actually was pointed us towards the tumor. There's a company called Vivu, who I'm interviewing the CEO shortly, and it's a stick that you wee on, and it gives you your ketone bodies, it gives you pH, it gives you your kidney function, your liver function, and it gives you white blood cell count. That was the first thing, actually. Mum's white blood cell count came back bad, really bad, and that was the first. I didn't understand
something, right? You're like, huh?
Yeah. And then a few days later, we saw the physical things. But that early, these at-home diagnostic tests that are starting to come on the market is exciting.
The early signs of things, right?
Yeah,
that's what I said about I see patients all the time that that have these neutral lymphocyte ratios, and I'm like, wow, your immune system is really screwed. We need to figure out what's going on and try and get that back in order. I just saw a patient who came to me because she's young, she's 60 something, and she has a kind of a rapidly progressive dementia. We got what's called a neuroquant brain scan on her, and we looked, and like 90% loss of gray matter. I mean, it was bad. And then you look at her immune stuff, and something is really awry with her immune system too. So you have to, as you put those things together, you're like, okay, there's maybe a viral influence. There's something else that's going on here that we have to tackle, that that's kind of affecting brain, but affecting your immune system, which and so again, and these are simple things to look at. It's not hard to look and see that your lymphocyte count has gone from 40% to 20%, and like, oh shit, that's not good.
This is why doing regular blood tests,
right,
and being preemptive and being preventative is just so important. And you go to your standard GP, and they're like, what do you want that for? Why do you want a blood test for?
Or they don't CBC is something every doc does every year, but then they don't look at it and say, oh, well, this is a little
this
weird.
ratio's off.
This ratio's off. They don't even look at that. I don't think I was ever taught that in med school, what that ratio meant. And yet we know that, for every point above 1.5 to 1, that your risk of dying goes up considerably. I mean,
wow.
It's dramatic. And there's other little signs too that things are going awry. For instance,
albumin,
like albumin dropping. Right. We know when the albumin starts dropping that the body is in a stress state. You can predict people who are going to do well with cancers. For instance, if you can get albumin levels high and you can maintain them, they're going to do better. So we know that albumin is another marker that the liver produces the albumin, and when the body's under a stress state, it doesn't produce as much albumin.
And that's a transporter, isn't it, for a lot of our hormones?
It's a transporter for exactly
protein.
Right.
Yeah.
And docs don't look at that. They don't look, oh my gosh, albumin's 3. This doesn't bode well for even my drugs working very well for her. So we have to get the albumin levels up. Sometimes that's difficult, but you've got to work on that. And then things you can look at too is like look at the cell size. You and I have talked about this too. So if you think about damaged cells, right? These cells that we kind of consider our zombie cells, the damaged cells, the senescent cells, right? Well, because they're stuck in these just continuous cycles, they're spewing out all these proteins, they get bigger and bigger and bigger. So senescent cells are bigger than nice, young, healthy cells. So simply, you can look at things like the size of the cells, which is a basic $6 blood test. It's looking at the cell volume and the red cell distribution width. You can look at those two things. And when the red cell distribution width starts going up, from above 12.3, for instance, cells are getting bigger. Something's going wrong with my cells. Those are all just signs that things are going awry that nobody really pays any attention to. I hate that people order labs and they never look at them. And it's a $6 test, right? That you can.
Have you actually? Because I'm doing stuff in your BLI Academy that you have, where people can come and join. By the way, and please do, because have you got that blood test course in there yet? Because I haven't.
We're actually going to put. So one of our things we're going to do in January is we're going to put together a course that is actually going to be under, these blood tests, and they'll walk you through what do each of these numbers mean in your blood test, right? So people can actually just do their blood test, and then we will walk you through, okay, if this number is above this is what we need to look at, this is what you need to do, so that people can actually start interpreting that stuff. So we actually had that course put together. It was actually a live person course right when COVID hit. And then and unfortunately everything. So we're going to try and redo that. Probably we'll do it both as a live course because we want people actually to maybe be able to draw the blood, but we'll also put it online so that people can kind of do it from other places as well. But that's because that's really critical stuff, is to look at those little tiny markers that just predict that even if something isn't wrong yet, if you get an insult, then it's going to go wrong. That's why when you look at your mom with developing lymphoma and this EBV, you're like, well, people don't think about EBV as a trigger to lymphoma, right? Most people don't. Lots of people are asymptomatic from EBV. You get some people who remember having mono vividly. I don't remember having mono. Maybe I had, maybe I didn't. Most people got exposed to mono, but nobody, and it becomes it's funny to me. It's like, oh, it's mono. And nobody really thinks about the long-term ramifications. I mean, it scares me to death for my son who really he got hit hard, right? And I don't tell him this. I don't say, listen, we got to really watch for lymphoma in you, but he's at a high risk. He has a 50% increased risk of developing lymphoma with age.
Wow.
But it happens as we get older because our immune system has now been taxed for so long. So if we could say, okay, yes, you had this virus. Let's try and eradicate antibodies, but let's just keep your immune system healthy as long as we can, until 150, then hopefully that doesn't impact us.
Well, he's lucky to have you as a mom.
That's
all I can say.
You won't even listen to my podcast.
I know, your own family, they never ever, they have no idea how like what you do.
Exactly. I'm like, will anybody watch my podcast? No, it's kind of boring.
Well, I do, and I love it, and I know a lot of my listeners do too, and love what you're doing, and it is having a massive impact. And one day your kids will wake up and go, "Oh, Mum was right. Mum's always right." Well, your sister's always right. Are you listening, brothers? And It is, unfortunately, in your own family, because they've heard you rabbit on about shit stuff for years. They just tune out,
Right.
But
No,
then they do
it is
come to
funny,
you
right?
when the shit hits
When
the
something's
fan.
wrong, right? When something's wrong, they're right. Hey,
Yeah.
mom,
Save me now.
you get that all the time, exactly. But they're not going to listen before that, right?
No. I wanted to just talk a little bit about immune system, because we are dealing with corona right around the world. We've got new variants, we've got bloody lockdowns, we've got a lot of stresses, and we've got everything going wrong. How can we naturally support our body so that if we are unfortunate, or even if we're getting vaccines because we want to, like you said, thymosin alpha-1 helps support your body, create the antibodies and all of this. And, I don't care which side of the vaccine debate you stand, both sides welcome on this podcast, because we just need to have open debate. That's all I'm asking. Open, honest, clear debate about these things and being able to discuss.
Science, right? Just science.
Science would be nice, yeah. Say no more. But what I want us to actually, what can we do naturally with our nutrition, our supplementation to support our bodies, whether we're having the vaccine or whether we're having the viruses hitting us? What can we do to prepare?
So some of the stuff that I think a lot of people hear about, which is, we know that vitamin D is just key, and here's again where the science just keeps getting neglected. It was funny. I was giving a talk at the Dave Asprey biohacking conference, and
wow, yeah.
And at our table he had these little pins, that were our vitamin D passport. Here's your passports. I mean, so instead of a vaccine passport, we had our vitamin D passports, because honestly, the data really supports if your vitamin D levels are robust, your likelihood of getting sick from COVID is extremely small, or and in fact, all the data and all the scientific evidence points that way. And yet people are still not giving enough vitamin D. So, and honestly, almost everybody needs about 10,000 IUs of vitamin D, and usually taking it with K2 because it's going to get it intracellularly. And there are a small number of people who, vitamin D requires a binding protein to get it from the serum into the cell. And you and I talked about this before, is that there are a small number of people who you'll get their serum levels and they'll be super high, and the docs will freak out. When we do testing, we look at intracellular levels too. And there's these people with very, very high serum levels, but their intracellular levels are low because they don't have enough of this binding protein to carry the vitamin D into the cells.
The transporter, the GC.
The transport protein, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's where there are some people who really, honestly, it's not really a great substitute from sunlight. But the downside being of sunlight is that people get wrinkles and you burn, and that can be an issue. I mean, you've got pretty dark skin. I've got pretty dark skin. We're a little bit protected, but you have those pale people, they get in the sun, they immediately burn. How are they going to get, vitamin D absorbed? But, but you can use, there's lamps, certain wavelengths of lamps that will give you vitamin D absorption that people can utilize for an hour a day. And so there's other things you can do. I would say everybody needs 10,000 IUs of vitamin D. Taking it with some K2 is ideal, and they make a lot of supplements that have the two together, just because you'll get more carried into the cell that way.
Right.
And then if you can get sunlight exposure, get some sunlight exposure. It's even if it's just a little bit during the daytime hours.
Yeah.
Harder as it gets winter here. It's summer for you guys, getting towards summer now for you guys. But we're getting.
Is that why you have more colds and the flu in the winter, because there's less sunlight?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
People, so it's because we're inside. It's a lot of it has to do with, you look at vitamin D levels in the winter and they go way down. So it is really a key. And I can't emphasize it enough. If you are not taking vitamin D during this COVID world, that is just dumb. It's just dumb.
So what
there's
does
nobody,
it
people
actually
get really
do?
scared. So vitamin D actually upregulates one of our antimicrobial peptides. So we talk about peptides. So there's a peptide that our body makes called LL37.
That's right.
LL37 is a really good antimicrobial peptide. It helps us to fight off infections. So whether that be wounds or viral infections, but our own antimicrobial peptide system is really, and so vitamin D actually upregulates some of our antimicrobial peptides. So it's actually, instead of buying expensive LL37, you can actually take more vitamin D and upregulate your own LL37. So that's one of the ways it really is extremely helpful. And LL37 is a great antiviral agent too. We use that in a lot of viral illnesses. So when you talk about ways to eradicate some of these viruses, LL37 is a way. Well, not everybody can get all 37. So take some vitamin D, make a little bit more of your own, right?
Yep.
So that's, and there's been a huge fear about taking too much vitamin D because it's like, oh, it's fat soluble, you can take too much. Literally, Lisa, the studies have shown that you need to be taking massive amounts to be ever become toxic. So at 10,000, nobody is going to become toxic. You really honestly don't have to worry about it.
That's great, because I've been like on 5,000 and I've now been, a bit scared to go above that.
No, there's nobody who's become toxic on 10,000. It probably takes at least 50,000 IUs taken on a regular basis. And then a few people might become toxic, but it's pretty rare even at that. And I had one patient ever become toxic, and she was taking literally, I think one drop was, it was supposed to be one drop was 5,000 IUs, and this, whatever this vitamin D supplement she bought, it was a liquid, and she was doing like 5 dropperfuls a day. She's like, oh, I thought like one dropper full was 1,000, and so she was doing like 5. So she was probably doing like, I don't know, 500,000 IUs a day, and even then, once she started getting nauseous, and we checked her levels, and they were high, and we stopped it, and she was fine. But so don't be afraid of that.
And there seems to be that toxins or something in the environment, I don't think we know really, but there seems to be a less conversion, like something that's stopping us converting.
Part of it's we're just not in the sun.
That too.
We're inside all the time, right? And then if we're in the sun, we're all wearing our sunblock because we were so afraid of wrinkles and skin cancer, so we're all wearing sunblock, which blocks the vitamin D absorption a bit. So that's the problem, because it's tough. Especially anybody who's darker skin. So African Americans, like people like myself, Mediterranean origin, you tend to have lower vitamin D levels, because if you think about it, you were designed to be in the sun all the time, right? So your body did not have to be super efficient to absorbing vitamin D, because you spent all day in the sun, and so you got plenty of it. So now that we're not sitting out in the sun all day, we weren't meant to be inside people. We were meant to be in the sun. People from Norwegian ancestries, things like that, their bodies got a little more efficient because they weren't in the sun all the time. So they got, they don't need nearly as much sun to get it. Right. So if you're a darker skinned person, your likelihood of having low levels is much higher. Especially your African American population. They'll come in with, I want a vitamin D level above 70, and they'll come in with vitamin D level of 6. I mean,
and we do this in our DNA testing as vitamin D, your transporter genes and
exactly. So you can look at that, right?
So I know helpful,
actually, so you know people who then are, you're going to either need more, or you're going to not be able to get it orally. Those are the people too, where sometimes you have to stay out,
get out the
genetics and say you need to get it from sun.
And there was a few other things. There was zinc, which is another easy, cheap thing to do, everybody. Why is that important?
So when you look at viruses in general, is they they utilize your zinc, they deplete your zinc. So they utilize the zinc for viral replications. One of the reasons you lose your taste and smell with COVID. So, what is the first sign of zinc deficiency? It's loss of taste and smell. So, you can kind of test zinc, if somebody's zinc deficient, by doing a smell test on them, because people who have low zinc levels will have not nearly as good sense of smell or taste. So you can actually do that to look for people who are somewhat depleted in zinc. So if you guys have noticed that, you're not smelling as well as somebody else, or you can't taste as well as your friend, it may well be a zinc deficiency. But the virus really utilizes zinc, especially this COVID virus. So that may be one of the reasons we see the loss of taste and smell associated with COVID. So we know that zinc is, by having higher levels of zinc, that's going to, to help support us. And
you overdo zinc,
you can, and mostly it has to do with keeping a zinc copper ratio.
So buy one with a zinc copper ratio in it.
Right. So you want about a 1-to-1 zinc copper ratio. So when people are taking lots of zinc and they don't have as much copper, because most of us don't take as much copper, right? You're not taking copper supplements very much. Everybody's taking tons of zinc now because they know it's antiviral, but not copper. If that ratio gets off too much, people will actually start getting weird neurologic things. They'll almost look MS-like. They'll start getting weird numbness and tingling, things like that. And that's getting that ratio off. So, copper also can become toxic. You don't want to take too much copper, but if you're taking a lot of zinc, you might want to add a little 2 milligrams of copper, to keep it balanced, right? Or what I really like, I love buying, you can buy copper peptide creams, face creams, right? Because copper peptides are so good for your skin. GHK copper helps
for collagen.
It's another peptide, right? GHK copper, and you can inject it, but you can also just use it as a topical skin agent.
And it gets in.
and it's great
Wow.
for wrinkles, and it's great for skin integrity. And so, Lorraine Pickard, who's this 90-some-year-old, guy who really discovered GHK copper. If you can ever get him on your show, he's kind of delightful.
Wow.
But so he's a guy who's investigated all about GHK copper. He has an entire site called reverseskinaging.com that actually has tons of these creams that are great, not horribly expensive face creams. Well, if you use this copper peptide cream on your skin and on your face, you're going to get a nice little absorption of copper too, along with helping age spots and wrinkles and collagen integrity. So it's kind of a nice little way to keep copper levels up, not get too much, not get nauseous from it, and still get some good benefits from it.
Wow.
So yeah, so that's where you can sort of kind of overdo the zinc.
Yeah. So it's just that ratio. And
that ratio is important.
Quercetin helps get zinc into the cell too, doesn't it? So quercetin's quite a good one.
Yeah, quercetin's good too as well. Yeah. Quercetin has a lot of other benefits, and quercetin's useful in your cancer journey too, right?
Yeah. And what I'm finding in my research in this deep dive into cancer that I hadn't actually been in this area before is that everything that's there's resveratrol and quercetin, and all these things are actually good for cancer as well as for the viruses stuff.
Yeah, I mean, quercetin actually works on that glucose transport too, right? So it's blocking some of that glucose transport. So that's really why it's kind of helpful in cancer cells, is it's blocking that GLUT1 receptor. So it's keeping the glucose out of the cells a bit. So that's where it's really advantageous, for the cancer cells.
My God, you know so much off the top of your head. Wow. And that there are drugs too, like ivermectin and stuff, that also help the zinc get into the cell, and I think that's one of the methodologies why that works. There was one called honokiol. I don't know if that's what you say it. That big magnolia bark extract that's also good for cancer. And
Magnolia officinalis, right? Honokiol is actually really interesting, also known as Raylora. Is basically made from Magnolia officinalis. It's kind of an amazing immune modulating agent. Don't ask me exactly the mechanism, because I'm not sure I can really deep dive into that. But we know it has great antiviral properties. It's also a great thing for adrenal function too. So it's we use it a lot just to help people who are stressed, and we'll have them take a little Raylora at night, because it's super. It sort of settles down cortisol. But it also has some really interesting antiviral properties as well. So it's something that has some, again, dual benefits, sort of, in this kind of stress world. Take a little bit of Raylora before you go to bed, you'll sleep better, your cortisol levels will be better, your adrenal glands will be protected, and you're also fighting against COVID.
Wow.
So those are things, and then there's things like zeolites. I don't know how familiar you are with, using zeolites.
No, I'm about to get some today.
Zeolites and they're great for cancer too, right?
Yeah.
But the way they work in viruses, zeolites are when simplistically, when volcanic ash kind of hits water, it forms this negatively charged sort of cage-like structure. And they're used a lot in like dentistry for mercury toxicity. So when your dentists take out your mercury fillings, the really good dentists, not so good dentists, but when the good dentists are taking out mercury fillings, they'll put people on these zeolites because it'll help detox the mercury out of your system. Or if you're eating a lot of sushi, things like that, this is something you want to do, because everybody who eats a lot of sushi has high mercury levels, everybody. And so you've got to detox mercury out. And so one of the problems with most of our detox agents is they're negatively charged and they bind all the positively charged things. So that gets rid of, unfortunately, good things like calcium and magnesium and all that good stuff that we need. So then you have to replace all these things, or people start having muscle cramps and kidney failure. And so zeolites, because they're these cages, the bigger things like calcium and magnesium and all these good positively charged things can't get into the cage. But what can get in is these positively charged things like mercury, arsenic, those kind of bad toxins. But also when viruses, get into our system, they're not full viruses. They're actually parts of viruses, like the spike protein, but they're parts of viruses. When they're still parts, they actually have this again positive charge, and they're tiny enough that so those parts get picked up by these little cages and get excreted. So in a viral infection, you can use the natural cellular defense to help get rid of the virus, or so early on, if let's say you get the virus, right, you don't even know. So if people are using a little bit of natural cellular defense, or there's a bunch of brands of activated zeolites, to be careful with the brand, because they can also contain toxins if they're not well done. But that's another thing that can be utilized, especially if you do start to get sick, is then we'll have people do like, 15 drops 3 times a day of these zeolites. They have some interesting anti-cancer properties as well. You can't have them, you can't do them when you're doing chemotherapy, because then they get rid of the toxin too, right?
Okay.
Chemotherapeutic agents are toxins. And so you can't do them, but you can do them afterwards to, number one, help get rid of all the stuff that's still doing damage that you don't want, right? Yep. So we use them a lot, but you can do them with some chemotherapy agents, but I tell my patients not to do them while they're actively doing the chemotherapy, because we want that toxic crap all over our body, unfortunately.
Yeah, we want it to actually kill the cells, but without the collateral damage. So when we, with my mum's journey, we're probably going to have to go down that route. So I'm going to have to double check that each one of the things that I've got on is,
and the big thing there, again, a big thing is just honestly, Lisa, we got to keep her immune system healthy, especially at 80, right? That we've got to have her immune system robust enough, because, unfortunately, what people die from when they're doing this is infections, right? When you're trying to treat these lymphomas and leukemias, is then unfortunately people get infections because we're wiping out their bone marrow, and
and like, this is like probably the hardest time of my life. You got bloody COVID on one side, and you got freaking cancer on the other. And you're trying to keep it on the line, and you got lockdowns everywhere, and you're going, hubby's going to lose his job and things like that too, by the look of it. So it's just like, really, like, come on, world.
You just got to keep, you just got to keep marching forward and doing your best. I know it's it's a hard time not to be depressed. And
this is where all the mental work really pays off.
Meditation, I mean, which is, again, huge for our immune system. I lost both my parents last year. My mom passed away in September, and my dad had prostate cancer, but it's literally for 25 years he's had prostate.
You kept him alive that long.
And prostate cancer is slow growing, and he was fine, right? Literally, and he was fine literally. Then after my mom died in September, he got really sick and felt horrible. And I took him in, and literally his prostate specific antigen had gone from like a normal, like I don't know, it was like 3 or 4. It had gone to 2,000.
Wow.
And that's where you look at, okay, what does this stress? I mean, he took care of my mom dying, right? And it wasn't even losing her. I think it was the stress taking care of her, because it was 3 months of literally, she had more of that slow, tedious death of, she fell, broke her pelvis. It was a nightmare. And he was the primary caretaker. So the stress is tremendous. And we helped him, but the stress is tremendous. And you can see what stress does to us. And how it affects our
I think that's why mum's got what she's got, apart from the Epstein-Barr virus. We lost dad last year, and it was hell. And he was
right. When you go through those stressors, right? And that's what you have to watch as a caretaker, as somebody, is because our health gets so incredibly, and that's what you talk about, trying to keep this mental game going, because don't downplay how cancer loves that high cortisol and all these things. So you have to just keep trying to keep in a mental place that's decent, because that takes our toll. It's toll more than anything on our health.
We've got to, and this is the piece of the puzzle. I was talking to a lady yesterday who survived cancer, and she said, don't neglect the mental side of it. You're a hard ass athlete, but you've got to address mum's spiritual and emotional well-being as well. And my mum is just stoic. She's a stoic,
right.
Yep. We'll just get on with that, instead of I'm at least very expressive. Like, I bawl my eyes out, scream and yell. I get it out. But I had
sometimes those people who are internalizing everything. That's right. They're not reaching out for help. My dad too. My dad never reached out for help, and there was nothing ever that would, he would have asked for or needed, or he's like, I'm fine, I'm fine, right?
Until
but he wasn't, right? He wasn't fine.
and when you lose, the cornerstone of your world, I think that causes just the grief and the caregiver process. I know what my body like as an athlete. Going from I've been caring for my mum now for 6 years on an everyday basis for 6 years. Even though I'm extremely fit as far as the gym's concerned and things like that, I cannot do what I used to do. I haven't got the resilience there to go and run 100K or not even 10Ks is a long run for me now, because I just don't have those depth of resources, and also the mental focus. I haven't got it. Because
and you have to respect that, right? And you have to respect that that's that's not where you need to be right now, right? And you need rest and recovery, and you need and you need the people around you who take care of you, and you need And you're right. I mean, your mom never, she's not going to ever ask for help. I mean, you're always there for her, but
she's,
that's not her
but she's
personality.
very stoic, but she's so cooperative when she's not on dexamethasone. And that's the reason I believe that she's still here. And she wants to live and she wants to fight, and she's got that quiet fighter nature, and I think that's key to it. Dr. Elizabeth Yurth, you've been amazing today. Thank you so much on so many levels, like personal levels, as well as for this podcast and well as the work. I really want everybody listening to this to go and join up for the BLI Academy. Can you tell them where to find that? And we'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, just bli.academy.
Yep.
And then you can sign up there. And like Lisa said, our goal is to teach you guys, because you're going to have to take control of your own health. You can't really rely on doctors to do it. And that's why you've got to keep watching Lisa and learning this stuff, because you're going to have to learn it. If you're going to take control of your health and you're going to keep these diseases at bay, you've got to understand this stuff. So our goal is to educate you the way we think doctors should be educated, but they don't do it. And so we're going to rely on you guys to learn this stuff. And I teach you based on scientific data. I'm none of it's my opinions.
Yeah.
Some of it even disagrees with my opinions, but I'm going to give you the scientific evidence, and then you can utilize that. And if you have to defend it, like if you have to go to your oncologist and go, well, here's the science, and that's what you need to do. And so we're going to give you the science. We're going to teach you how to look at your labs, how to, what steps to take, kind of the overall health. It's fun, and we keep adding to it. And as I learn, I teach you guys, because this is honestly, medicine is lagging. It takes 17 years for things to get from discovery to medical practice, and that's too late, right? So you've got to know it.
You've got to know what the latest is.
Right, the latest stuff is, right.
And you have to fight for how to get it, how to find it, how to get it in the country, all of those things. And anyone else is also listening who is dealing with a really difficult health journey. I have my mum officially under the care of Dr. Elizabeth Yurth in the Boulder Longevity Academy or Institute. And it's the best thing I've ever done, is to have her under your care prior to this happening and now. So I really encourage people to, if you're facing a really, you've got a really shitty situation, make sure you get under the care of Dr. Elizabeth Yurth and her team there, who are also brilliant. The whole team is really,
or if you are healthy and you're just like, oh, I want my labs looked at in this really intricate fashion. I want to know, do I have some pending things? So, even if you're super healthy, we'd love to see you and kind of walk you through these things to say, let's keep you there. Let's make sure you have things optimized. Because I can say, I feel great, I'm healthy, but there's a lot of little things that I find in my labs, like crap, I'm not so healthy. And as you and I know, Lisa, when you're like us and you do everything right, and then you find things in your labs that you're like, I'm not perfect.
You still
it really
get shingles.
sucks, but at least we're not right. Yeah, right. It always pisses you off, but at least it's there and you can address it.
And it is a matter of keeping this going, so that you don't just get suddenly, wake up one day with, and you still can't. You still
exactly. Bad stuff can still happen, right?
But then you've got the best doctor to help you get out of the shit, and that's what we're doing with Mum, the cat with 9 lives, I call her. So, Dr. Yurth, thank you so much for your time today. I really, really love you. I think you're amazing.
Love you.